Welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name is Adam Hanlon, and I'd like to introduce you to our regular correspondent, Alexeyevich Mustardo. Hello, Alex. Alexeyevich.
Hi, Adam. Hi. Yeah, very good.
How's my Russian?
Yeah. Oh, well, I couldn't find a fault in it.
Excellent. So today, what we're going to discuss is focus lights, and specifically, I'm going to ask Alex which focus light he has and what he likes about it, and possibly what he doesn't like about it.
Well, I'd have to say this isn't an area where I would say I'm a sort of world expert on focus lights. I don't use my focus light all that much. I use it only when I need to. And as a result, this is the focus light that I use, and I do really like it. It's relative. It's quite a small one. If I hold it close to the camera, it kind of looks big. But I would say it's at the small end of focus lights. Yeah. And part of the reason I like that is because it's small and light, and I'm always trying to get other pieces of equipment are higher priority for me when traveling. Yeah. So a bit of save weight on my focus light is good. This is a Kraken one. I think it's the same company as We Find.
Yes, it is.
Just different marketing. This is a Kraken Hydra 1000 WSR Plus. It's probably 3 years old now, so it may well be sort of succeeded by some other cameras, other models of this same brand. But I like this one. It's a nice thin one. You can see it's it's about it's thinner than 2 fingers, kind of just similar sort of length. So it's a nice size focus light, and it's got kind of 4 main modes. It uses a rechargeable battery, dedicated battery for it, which I don't always like. Maybe talk about why that is. But it's got its own battery, but I only have 1 battery for it. I don't travel with a spare from a weight point of view. And then it's got 4 modes, or 3 main modes. One is a spotlight mode, one is a floodlight mode, and one is a red light mode. And those are the 3 main modes. So which focus light do you use, Adam?
So I've got the Inon, and it's the Inon. I'll have to have a look, get the numbers right. It's an LF 1300 EWF, and it's relatively small.
It's nice looking.
Yeah. It runs on AA's, and again we might revert to that. But so it runs on 3 AA's, which is it's nice and compact. I prefer shorter focus lights, and again possibly the reason for that we can come back to in a minute. It has a ball mount, which I like very much, so it allows me to adjust it pretty much through the full range of motion. In terms of modes, interestingly enough, it has a very adjustable beam. It only has white light output, but it's very adjustable, so I can adjust it from not very bright to very bright. And it does come with diffusers, so it has a red diffuser I can attach to it if I want red light. But it doesn't have a spotlight mode. And for me, it certainly is something that I actually do miss. So that's certainly one feature that I'd very much like to see on it if I was to choose my next light. I think a good thing to mention as well about focus lights. So we both discussed the ones we have, but possibly, I think we both agree that actually we probably don't attach these on our housings very often. So what circumstances do you use a focus light in, Alex?
Well, I'm going to answer this the flippant way and say when I need to. But actually, there's seriousness in that. I don't like my underwater housing to be like a Christmas tree and have all these things on it. Just because I own something, it doesn't mean it's coming on my dive with me every dive. I like my camera to be as streamlined, as small as I can be. I like space to be able to put my normal lighting, where I want it to be, not have things in the way, clutter in the way. And so as a result, I take my focus light when I think I'm going to need it. So I've obviously been doing a lot of UK diving recently, and they're in darker conditions, using the focus light much more frequently than perhaps I would, particularly when shooting macro, than I would diving in the tropics, where generally most day dives are far too bright, and the cameras focus so well, I don't really need to see the full colors of the subject. And I don't like using a focus light because with some subjects, it definitely can make them turn away from the camera in a way that strobes don't. There's no doubt in my experience that continuous light has more of an effect on subjects than strobe light does. So I get better poses for my subjects without using one.
I think this is an important thing to find out is, does your camera's autofocus system need a focus light? And certainly many of the newer cameras are quite competent at focusing, even in quite low light, without it. And if you don't need it, leave it at home. I think both of us tend to move our lighting around quite a lot, and obviously by adding this extra item onto our housing, no matter where we attach it, to some extent it always gets in the way when we're trying to move the lights around, particularly moving from verticals to horizontals and vice versa. So if you don't need it, don't take it. It's probably good advice.
So I like having a light that's got both a spotlight mode and a flood mode. I think when you're actually shooting the subject, a flood mode is really good if it's a sensitive subject. You don't then have a sudden harsh transition from it being completely in the dark to when it's lit up. Also, it makes the aiming of the light much less sensitive. So if you've got the light sort of roughly pointing forwards and you decide to change your composition, your subject just doesn't suddenly drop out of the light just as you get the picture right. So I think the floodlight is nice for that. However, in low visibility, the floodlight can be like running with your headlights on your car in full beam, and it just lights up all the bits in the water and you can't see anything. So in low visibility, I tend to use the spotlight mode a lot more. It cuts through the light. It's much easier to find subjects with. I find it as a spotting light for actually finding things. A spotlight is much better than a floodlight.
And that's certainly something I miss with this, is that I find it's fine. It's a very nice soft wide beam that's great as a focus light, but it's not very good for spotting. So unless the subject's relatively close, I can't see it, which means that I end up carrying an additional torch to then use the spotting light, and then I've got to do the whole juggling the extra torch around when I find something I want to shoot. So I think the option of having a spotting function on the built into the light is a nice one. It's certainly one that I would like. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that flood mode is also good if you're using for video. Typically most of us aren't ever bothering, but if you are in emergency,
it's worth mentioning too, and this is something that people often get slightly confused about, is that in general, when your strobes fire, they will overpower the light of your spotting light. Focus lights, and people often, and there are lights out there that automatically quench when you fire the light. In fact, this has that option, which I actually normally leave off. But generally, you don't need it, because when you fire the strobe, it's going to cut out the light from your focus light anyway. So I would suggest that that's not a huge kind of useful feature, although it is available on a lot of them now.
Yeah, so I think it's good to have, but not essential. I think the downside of it is the time you typically see that torchlight coming into your picture is when you make a long exposure. Because during that long exposure, there's time then for the spotlight to go in the photo. And then because it might even blur a little bit because it's a continuous light source on the subject, can be very annoying. The problem is that if you've got this auto detect cutoff, so when the flashes go, the torch goes off. If you're making that long exposure holding the camera still,
it goes back on.
You should ideally be using rear curtain sync. So your flashes are going to go at the end of the exposure, so they don't quench the. So you have to use it with front curtain sync. So it doesn't. So what I tend to do in those situations, I'll use the focus light to find the subject, and then I'll turn it off, and maybe that's typically a wide angle situation, and then I'll shoot without it. So I think something I like about your one is that it uses AA batteries.
Agree.
I have no problem with the performance of the lithium-ion batteries in these. It's just you are very reliant on a battery. If you want a spare, it can be expensive and heavy. And we've got so much stuff that runs on AA. Why doesn't more stuff run on AA?
And you don't need the additional charger. It's simple and straightforward. I think possibly something that, again, Alex and I both agree on is that I tend to favour situations where I need to charge batteries as opposed to charging the whole light. In general, although there are advantages in keeping the light sealed continuously, i.e. you have some kind of external charging plug, the implementation always seems somewhat problematic. So in general, ones where I can just take the batteries out and put another set of batteries in of some description, be they lithium rechargeables or be they AA's, is a good option as well. But yeah, it's one of the things I really like about this is that I don't have to carry an extra charger. I've got the batteries anyway. I just bung them in and use them, and it's very straightforward. Yeah.
I think if you're already an underwater photographer, I think you can cope with a small round O-ring.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
to look after. So, you know, I can understand if you like, you know, if you're a normal diver who's not used to dealing with those things, then maybe a sealed light is a big deal. But I think for us guys, you know, it shouldn't be.
I agree.
So where do you normally mount your focus light, Adam?
So it depends a little bit on what I'm doing, but our most common position is my housing has the option of having an extra ball in the centre of it. So I normally mount it on the centre of that, peering down over the port. Obviously, I'm pretty much only using these things for macro shooting. In the past, Nauticam ports have actually a cold shoot on the actual macro port, and I quite like putting it on there, with the proviso being that it's not great when you want to shoot verticals, because it starts getting in the way. But for shooting horizontals, it's great, which again brings back this idea that, you know, I only want the focus light when I need it to be there, because if I decide to shoot to verticals, it does get in the way. But yeah, generally mine is mounted centrally on the centre of the housing, on top of the housing. How about you, Alex? Where's yours sit?
Yeah, no, they're the same. I mean, the only thing I would say is that if I'm diving somewhere that has a lot of plankton in the water, people often talk about them as worms.
Yeah.
Then the only thing I'll do is I'll tend to add then a length of strobe arm for the torch to hoist it up much further away from the housing.
Yeah.
And actually, I'll often just get the longest strobe arm I've got and just put a single piece on and get that torch well away from the housing.
Yeah.
So at least that buzz of worms is way up there.
Not in the lens
torch
spot.
will still light my subject from way up there. It's a bit more fiddly to aim, and it's a bit more cumbersome, but it deals with that worm problem a lot. Cuba is, of all the places I've been, is the ultimate nightmare for worms at night. I don't know why, but yeah, that was my most recent big overseas trips. I
think in general the Caribbean, I've had really bad experiences with them in the Sea of the Yucatan as well. So not far from Cuba. So yeah, it's not surprising, is it?
What about red light mode? So most of them have a red light mode. The reason for that, the theory behind the red light mode is red light is absorbed very, very quickly underwater.
Yeah.
By the time that we're 10 feet underwater, 70% of that red light is gone.
Yeah.
So it absorbs very quickly underwater. And a lot of marine life is not sensitive to red light as a result, because it's not naturally in their environment.
Yeah.
So having a focus light that you can switch into a red light mode makes it invisible to quite a lot of marine life.
Yeah.
I find that's more true in the tropics, where red light is absorbed more quickly than it is in temperate waters.
Yeah.
Temperate water diving, I find animals are more susceptible to red light. And my experience, and I'm sure yours is the same, Adam, that there are plenty of animals that definitely can see red light.
Yeah. Or they react to it.
Certain animals, like mandarin fish, I remember us two doing a mandarin fish dive together. Red light can work almost like magic.
Yeah.
They really does seem invisible, but with other animals, they can certainly see it, and it doesn't work like magic. Yeah. So it's a useful feature, but it's not a solution for everything. That's what I would say.
Yeah, if you're using a red light and the animals are reacting, don't be surprised. You know, the only option you got then is to switch the focus light off, because, you know, they're sensitive to it. Yeah, I mean, certainly things like mantises, for example, you know, they can definitely see red light, and probably lots of other colours of light that we can't see, and they do react adversely to it. Which again, you know, it brings us to mind, you know, don't have the thing on if you don't need it. You know, switch it off.
Yeah. Switch back to white light. I think one mistake that I see quite often on macro workshops is people will stick their red light on for the whole of their night dive, shoot their whole night dive shooting in red, and what they'll often realise, because they don't see the colours of what they're shooting, they might have a great subject with a really great background behind it, but they didn't notice the background when they were looking through their camera. Because it was all lit in red light. And if they'd seen the colours, they might have changed their composition and made a better picture. And often in image review, I'll say, why didn't you move around to your left and get that background more behind? Even the cat's complaining about
the cat's complaining about the background. Yeah, he is.
Dogs. Where are your dogs at? Anyway, and I think that's one thing just to be aware of when shooting red light, is it can make you miss things because you're not seeing the colours.
And I think maybe that's an advantage. So your torch obviously has a red light mode, which is relatively simple to flip between the two. Mine actually has a filter that attaches to the front, which tends to make us lazy. I think, you know, if you've got a button you can press that will change modes, you're more likely to do it than you are screwing and unscrewing something off the front of it and then finding somewhere to put the filter away. So there definitely is possibly an advantage to having one that has a mode as opposed to a filter. I mean, ultimately, any white light, you could add a red gel to it to get a red light filter effect. So
Yeah. But obviously, starting with a red LED is a much more efficient way of getting that rather than producing lots of light and cutting it out. One thing I like about yours is that you've got that really adjustable power. And something that frustrates me with a lot of these lights is the manufacturers are going on and on about getting them more and more powerful. And actually, I just want enough light to be able my camera to focus. I don't want to have this huge bright light that scares the subject. And a lot of them, they have like maybe 3 power modes. But I find a lot of them, you can't turn them down enough. They're still too bright on their lowest settings. When you want to be stealthy, when you want to capture behavior, you just want enough light to focus. You don't need to light the world up. And I wish more of them had more low power modes.
Well, I often see people being sold a particular brand of focus light, a type of focus light, based on the fact it's very powerful. And actually, that's really is a red herring. You want a focus light that's powerful enough, but not very powerful. It's not a video light. You're not going to use it to light scenes up. You purely want it to give enough light so your camera can focus on what you're trying to shoot. And so overpowering is as bad as, well, possibly underpowering is okay. Overpowering is not okay.
And I think you touched on an interesting point that actually the majority of photographers are sold focus lights. I think almost every underwater photographer I know uses them. I know a lot of underwater photographers who never go night diving and who only dive in the tropics and really need to report those things. I'm sure everyone watching this has probably got one, and they're probably watching this with an intention of maybe upgrading a model or something. A feature I do like on some of them is I know quite a few of them now have UV LEDs in them, which is a really nice feature for being able to shoot on the fly some fluorescence photography. And I think that's a really nice feature. Also, I think it can be quite fun to have a few colored gels with you on a dive that you've cut out to fit over your focus light. Just find like a bottle top or a plastic cup or something that fits nicely on your thing, and you can just put gels in there and have colored light. That can be quite useful to take off your camera on a dive, put behind a subject, and create an interesting lighting effect.
I think that's something to bear in mind as well, and possibly having an adjustable output is useful for this. It does, if a creative opportunity comes along where you can use the light off camera or for some kind of lighting effect, being able to turn it up and get a decent output out of it is a useful thing. So it does make it more versatile, I suppose. But what you want to be able to do is when you don't want it bright, you want to be able to turn it down. This is really nice because it is infinitely adjustable. So I think that's lots of really good information there. Thanks, Alex. So
I know more about them than I thought I did.
We sounds like we both do. So that's great. Obviously, where can people see pictures of you where you've used focus lights? Where's the best place to find your images, Alex?
I do quite enjoy. I do use, particularly on macro destinations. I will quite often, actually, I didn't mention this on the trip, but I quite often just take this out of its holder. It just slides straight out. And I often just stick that in my BC pocket for the day. And some days it never gets used. Other days it comes out and I'll place it. It's negatively buoyant. I can place it on the seabed, backlight subjects. So that's the other reason I really like this one. And I do like that fast release. That's something also I do like is when I want to switch between using it on the camera, I don't have to unscrew this. I just pull it out the front and it's straight ready to go. And I do use it a lot, but I like to use it relatively subtly in pictures. But a lot of my macro diving pictures, there'll be tweaks and highlights come in from using it as a light source more than perhaps as a focusing.
Yeah, very cool, fantastic. I would just like to thank everyone for watching this episode. It's been great to talk about focus lights with Alex. I'd like to thank our sponsor, which is Bunaken Oasis in Indonesia. Please feel free to add any suggestions for future episodes in the comment section below, and to like this if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next time.